The WWE has seen the enemy, and they are now relatively in charge. I'm Chris Wolvie, the wrestling blogger who always tells it like it is.
Damn it, Raw! Are you actually sneaking a peek at my columns? I say that SmackDown puts their matches in a window during commercials, and then you do the same during your first match. I mean, I appreciate what you're doing, but stay out of my head! Ugh. And also, this is a bit earlier because I'll be out of town for the weekend on my birthday. Anyway, those who have been watching the WWE for the last 25 years no doubt know about Eric Bischoff and Paul Heyman. Now, those who've only been around a few years no doubt know Heyman as the advocate for the reigning, defending, etc., Brock Lesnar. And wonder why Bischoff was at the Raw reunion and at the Raw 25 years special way back when. But if you've been a part of wrestling for as long as I have, you know damn well that both Heyman and Bischoff were generals in the great promo war of the late 90s and early 2000s. 1993, what a wonderful year. The then World Wrestling Federation was still a year away from premiering what would become its flagship show, so getting TV time to counter recaps of house shows was important. And when Bill Watts stepped down as executive producer of Ted Turner's World Championship Wrestling, Eric Bischoff managed to sneak his way past Jim Ross and Tony Schiavone for the position. It was he who started upping the pay-per-views for the promotion and helped create Monday Nitro as a competitor to Raw. Bischoff turned WCW from a southern-based promotion to a national and later international promotion, just like Vince McMahon did with the WWE. In September of that year, another offshoot of the NWA, Eastern Championship Wrestling, was placed in the hands of former NWA WCW manager Paul Heyman, who was known in the NWA as Paul E. Dangerously. In a short amount of time, Paul would change the E from Eastern to Extreme and started to make things brutal for those on its roster. Even though the promo never quite slipped out of its Philadelphia roots, his story made a thorn in Mr. McMahon's side, a thorn that bothered him so much that he would create the Hardcore title just to compete with ECW. ECW would grab a primetime slot on TNN, though they did have to tone things down a little, and eventually they did lose it to Raw. And so began a three-way war. Most think it was just WCW versus WWE, but there was no denying that both of them were also trying to fend off the up-and-coming ECW, who were having pay-per-views across the country by the late 90s. And then came the late 90s. Bret Hart is unceremoniously kicked to WCW by Vince and would end up with injury after being paid so much. Then the Attitude Era began to turn the WWE on its ear. Both ECW and WCW see a drop in ratings, and since both put all their eggs in the TV ratings basket, they both folded, eventually bought up by WWE. Heyman would become a commentator for the WWE during the 5-month-long Invasion angle and become a manager later, but as far as we know, and anyone else knew, Bischoff had dropped off the face of the planet. That is, until Raw and SmackDown got general managers, needless to say, it was a severe shock to everyone when Mr. McMahon announced that the first GM of Raw would be Eric Bischoff. Hell, I even thought Bischoff was going to destroy Raw from within, out of spite. A few years later, Heyman was made GM of SmackDown, and I thought they'd do the entire WWE in. And seeing all three, Heyman, Bischoff, and McMahon, in the opening shot of the first WWE draft where superstars changed brands, it sent chills up my spine. It's a shame that Heyman would quit after he was drafted to Raw. And eventually Bischoff was fired and defected to TNA Impact for a while. Well, now it's not general manager in the title of those who were WWE's biggest rivals. It's executive director. Tomato, tomato, as far as I'm concerned. The only difference, besides swapping brands, is that they're doing their work behind the scenes rather than in front of the cameras. Bischoff also is working with Fox to ensure a smooth transition of SmackDown from USA this autumn, so that's good. But well, you can't help but wonder, can you? I mean, here they are, just a few rungs down the corporate ladder from the man who ruined them nearly 2 decades ago. You think that maybe there isn't some animosity still? You think that maybe just working for Mr. McMahon back then and even now are causing ulcers to these men? Now, I think that may be doubtful. I mean, Bischoff left on relatively decent terms, and he was welcomed back with semi-open arms a few years ago. And the WWE's done good by Heyman ever since Brock Lesnar ditched the UFC for WWE. I mean, yeah, Heyman tried to build a faction with other Paul Heyman guys and flopped, but, you know, he's still entertaining AF on the mic. Doesn't seem like he's too angry at what's been handed to him, but yet still always that lingering doubt in the back of your head. Raw and SmackDown are in the hands of people who 20 years ago wanted to be around Vince's neck. And no matter what you hear about time healing all wounds, I'm sure Bischoff and Heyman haven't forgotten the all-out offensive that the WWE undertook to end the war by 2001. These are conquered generals forced to play a part in making sure no new threats emerge like they did once upon a time. I'm sure they've been ordered to keep a keen eye on AEW and do whatever it takes not to see it become the next ECW or WCW. The king of sports entertainment is lounging on his iron throne in Stamford, Connecticut, laughing at all he prevails over. If I were Bischoff or Heyman, seeing the king's ruthlessness this century, I wouldn't be surprised if the idea of a coup didn't pop into my head a few dozen times a day. I'm Chris Wolvie, the wrestling blogger who always tells it like it is. See ya.